Hello, I'm Grin, and welcome back to Washer Dryer's fourth romp through Click Clock Wood, and I hope you've rugged up because it's time for winter. And while everything is frozen, let's immediately do the complete opposite of freezing, and instead speed up, because much like winter has turned these woods into a wasteland, there's little else to see at the present moment. And rather ironically, the first thing worth talking about while exploring the winter season is not outside, but instead found within doors. That's right, folks, we're back at Nabnut's house to rob the poor critter once again. Though, I suppose it could be worse, as far as logic dictates, Nabnut should really actually be dead. We did, after all, never actually manage to give him acorns, and so really, he should have dropped off along with the temperature due to starvation, and yet here he is, lying in bed, soundly asleep, seemingly dreaming of the acorns he never actually received. I'm not really sure why Eerie wound up dead, and yet Nabnuts has soldiered on. I suppose Nabnuts, maybe after realizing that we weren't going to help him, went out and gathered the nuts himself, as he's no doubt done before, which is good for him, though it's unfortunate that we're not going to get a jiggy out of it. But either way, let's speed up once more as we continue our journey to the summit of the tree in hopes of finding a flight pad so I can take down some of these pesky snowmen. However, on arrival, much like someone arriving far too late for the breakfast menu, my hopes of this were tragically dashed. Yes, indeed, so it seems the flight pad is not, as I had first believed, at the very top of the summit, but instead somewhere else in the level, which is really quite annoying because if you were paying attention to the fast-forwarded part as I was making my way to the summit, I had to avoid quite a few snowballs, and if I had known that the darn flight pad was down on the ground level, I could have just flown around and taken out all of the snowmen before I even began making my way up the tree. But instead, I did not and opted for the more difficult option of climbing without destroying the snowmen, and now I have to make my way back down again, once again, avoiding all of the snowballs. So let's speed up that slow descent as we make our way back down the tree again and to the ground floor in order to, once again, search for a darn flight pad. And having eventually found a flight pad, it's finally time to take flight. Time to take flight. And so begins our massacre, or at least attempted massacre, of as many Frosty the Snowmans as we can possibly find, which I feel is rather suiting, because after all, what's winter without destroying a couple of snowmen? Well, it's basically every winter in Australia, but you get what I'm saying. Aiming your aerial attacks as a washer-dryer is still rather difficult, which I suppose once again is rather suiting, as washer-dryers aren't really well known for their aerial attributes. Either way, it's time to take down yet another snowman. And gosh darn it, though successful in my attack, I seem to have, much like a petulant child, become grounded. And so let's rev up that deja vu and fast forward as we make our way down the tree in order to find a flight pad. At the very least, it's easier to find a flight pad when you already know where it is. So let's take off once again and resume our snowman massacre. And at this point, I'm really starting to hope you actually get something from destroying all of the snowmen, because I really don't remember if you do, and considering it's so darn difficult to do so, and that I'm wasting so much time in my attempt to do it, it's going to be really disappointing if by the end of it, I wind up with absolutely nothing to show for it. And further, speaking of nothing to show for it, as I continue to search around for some snowmen to kill, I realise that I'm fairly sure I've never actually attempted to get into Nabnut's attic while it was in the winter season. And as it seems to me that would be a really cool place to hide a little bit of an Easter egg, not as in a stop and swap one, I figure I might as well try at breaking an entry. It went about as well as you might well expect, though personally I blame Rare for that, because I maintain it would have been a really cool little thing to put into the game. Maybe I should tweet it to them as a suggestion and they can add it as DLC, though I won't be able to update my version of it until I figure out where you're supposed to put the Ethernet cable into the Nintendo 64. But let's put that issue aside, as it's time to once again face down against the snowman, and it's once again, not entirely successful. Fortunately, this time at least, there is a flight pad relatively close by. Also, I had to briefly stop and fight an ice cube, which really starts to raise quite a few questions. These questions are mainly concerned about the sentience and anthropomorphication of some of these enemies. I mean to ask, namely, why is it that ice cubes are able to move around, whereas snowmen that are far more humanoid are fixed to the ground? And before you say, but Grim, snowmen don't have any legs, how do you expect them to move around? Well, I must hastily point out that ice cubes don't either, nor for that matter do washer dryers. But I digress. While I was philosophically waxing, I explored the innards of Mumbo Jumbo's house and found little more than another confusingly sentient creature, and so it's time to explore the roof of it, on which I found the blue Jinjo. This Jinjo is of course the fifth and final Jinjo for Click Clock Wood, and so having gotten it, we've also managed to get our fifth Jiggy for the level. Which is far less impressive than it sounds, as on the surface 5 Jiggies doesn't sound so bad until you remember that this is the 4th video in Click Clock Wood, and so that's only a little bit more than 1 Jiggy per episode. And so let's work on making those unimpressive numbers a bit more impressive by inflating them through succeeding a little bit more. And to do so we begin by, of course, killing more snowmen. After all, it serves them right. They're throwing non-lethal snowballs at me, and I think anyone who's ever been an unwilling participant in a snowball fight would agree that death by disintegration through having a washer-dryer thrown so hard at you that it literally breaks you into small particles is a just punishment. But as you can't punish what's not there, let's speed up as I look for more snowmen. A search that went relatively well, aside from the fact that I didn't find anything that I was looking for, ended up trying to break a window with my skull again, and fell a rather large distance. It's never exactly good when something like this happens, but fortunately this time nothing much more was injured than my pride, and so the journey continues. It's a darn good thing I didn't die from that, because having to repeat so much of this level would be such a pain in the bottom. Having to go back through all of the seasons to reacquire all of the music notes, it would just be really quite infuriating. But now that I am on the ground, despite the fact that it was an accident, I might as well spend some time down here, as after all, while I was flying around in the air, I didn't see any more snowmen anyway, so they may well all be wiped out, and it's probably time to shift focus. And I ask you, what is more of a shift of focus from the sky than what lies underwater? Yes, indeed, much like Captain Nemo spurning the surface world by retreating underwater into his Nautilus, let's dive unprotected into a frozen pond. After all, Erie is dead, we've already robbed Nabnuts, and so we might as well go and visit the other character on this level, and steal whatever's not bolted down from the House of Naughty. And to anyone who suggests that maybe I shouldn't be robbing all of these innocent people of their belongings, I must bring up the great spiritualist the Huffington Post, who famously wrote that the enlightened person is free of worry because he understands that freedom of suffering comes from within and not from material possessions. But Grim, what does this exactly mean, you ask? Well, the article is rather vague about it, largely because it's the Huffington Post, but they seem to me to be expressing endorsement of the idea of minimalism. Essentially, if that's what gives us freedom from suffering comes from within, then what is without is nothing more than a distraction of what's really important. Essentially, consumerism and excessive belongings are just distracting you from enlightenment and meditation, and so essentially by robbing Naughty, not only am I not doing him a disservice, but I may well be actually saving his spiritual soul. But Grim, you may cry in concern, what about your spiritual soul? Weighed down by all of these possessions that you're so charitably relieving from people, how are you going to be able to raise yourself up and lift your spirits to a level of enlightenment? To which I say, honestly at the moment, I'm far more concerned about lifting myself out of this water than I am with lifting myself up spiritually, because while no doubt enlightenment is all nice and all that jazz, not drowning in a frozen lake is far higher up on my list of importance. And gosh darn it. So, I suppose it's time to start fast-forwarding quite a lot, as now that I've gone and carked it, well, I'm going to basically have to retrace all of my steps from the previous 3 videos, so let's fast-forward. We will, however, of course, slow back down whenever we're about to encounter something of importance, and I ask you, what is more important than a Miss Jiggy? It might actually be, see that I'm back to making bee puns, not such a bad thing that I died, as after all, if I hadn't, I probably wouldn't have realized that I missed this Jiggy, and would have never gone back and gotten it, so silver lining, but that brings us up to 6 Jiggies for the level, which at least is better than we were doing in the previous life. But let's kick it back into turbo because we're still retracing our steps as closely as a man following a 3-day bender goes through his bank statement in an attempt to re-establish what happened over the previous few days, how many mistakes he made, how many places he's no longer welcome, and how many people he likely must apologize to. But enough rambling about that, as it's time to slow down once more and ground powder Gruntilda switch. And having done so, we've made appear the overworld Jiggy for Click Clock Wood, which means it's time to speed up once more and continue to skip through the seasons with more time travel than is found in Power Rangers Time Force. You know, I say casually in an attempt to make conversation while my life flashes before your eyes, that the bad guy from Power Rangers Time Force is played by the same actor as the bad guy from Jurassic City and Cowboys vs. Dinosaurs, which, considering all three of them, have sort of time travel elements. I mean, they've all got things from the past in the future, or things from the future in the past. I like to believe that they're all actually the same universe. But enough talking about Vernon Wells, who, by the way, has an extremely cool name, as it's time to get that Jiggy from earlier that, though unlocking, I totally forgot to actually collect. And also, did you notice I got the Jiggy from above, just like I said I would try to do in the previous video, even though in that video I forgot to then go and do it. At least now I've gone and made up for it. But let's speed things up again, because there's one or two more important things to do before this episode must come to an end. And also, as we do chuff along, I must point out with some sense of accomplishment that having now gotten 7 Jiggies, we've actually gotten the total amount of Jiggies that it seems you're able to unlock in this level while as the washer dryer. And while it does kind of suck that we're limited to not being able to get those final 3 Jiggies, it still feels good to know that I got every single one that I could possibly actually get. But speaking of getting, let's go and slow down once more, as I've gone and got, as well as the final possible Jiggy, the final music notes in Click Clock Wood. Which I've got to say I'm pretty darn chuffed about, as if I had missed one it would mean I would have to go back into all of the different seasons once again to try and find out where I had slipped up. But I didn't, and so that means it's time to speed up again for the final time in this episode, as there's little else to do other than to turn back into a bee and leave the game world. Which just about brings us to the end of Washer Dryer's adventures in Click Clock Wood. It was a fairly successful one as far as Washer Dryer adventures go, as while it's true we missed 3 Jiggies, we still managed to get 7 of them and every single music note. And so thanks for watching, and as always I have been and still am Grim Grindle. If you'd like to join the Channel Grim and Grin Discord or follow me on Twitter, links to both of them are in the description below. Oh, and look there, hark on the horizon, it's even the overworld Jiggy. So while technically it doesn't, that sort of somewhat brings us up to 8 Jiggies from Click Clock Wood, though one of them is really just an overworld Jiggy.